Charleston City Council Committee on Public Safety. Since you and I are the only live people here, I'm going to call on you for an invocation.
Well, I ask everyone to join me, please, in a prayer. Heavenly Father, please bless us as we conduct the business of the city and look out for the safety of our citizens. We thank those who, on a day-to-day basis, are providing those public safety services, our policemen, our firemen, both men and women who serve in both departments and emergency management. And also, Lord, please remember those who conduct justice in our municipal court system, all the efforts that they conduct in order to help keep Charleston and our citizens safe. Keep us blessed, and in your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right.
Well, welcome everybody here to this meeting. Our next order of business is the approval of our May 9, 2022 and I'll entertain a motion with some changes and modifications.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it. All right. I've asked our new head honcho judge, but sure, you're exactly the title we should be bestowing on you, Judge Dina. Thank you for being here. You and Judge Morrison have been the leaders, the new leader of the municipal court system. And so I've know there's been some changes with our court administrator and some other changes that you and I have discussed. And our two guests who are here with us today, former Judge McFarland and Jerry Harris, and I've had several conversations about some of the concerns that we've expressed with the court system. So I thought it'd be appropriate for either you or Judge Morrison to lead us with what has occurred in the past, I guess, 6 months or so with the administration of our court system. You or Judge Morrison want to take the lead, or how do you wish to proceed? She's used to this council chambers because she knows to go right to the microphone and but you do need to talk into the microphone a little bit closer.
Right, bring it down a little bit. There you go. Excellent.
With us today, I think Judge Diego will be joining us a little later. I did ask the prosecutors and also the public defenders join us if they could, but I think they may have some conflict. So if the questions have come up regarding.
We're going to switch out your microphone, I think.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, that's better.
That's better.
Okay. There you go.
So we may have some other court people popping in and out throughout the presentation. Also with me today are Joanne Hayes and James Moody, who are people who have been part of the court team for a while, a number of years, and have recently been promoted to management positions. And I would like to say that they are doing an amazing job. So I know we need to move quickly this afternoon. Our time is limited. I did hand out to everyone a packet of information that may give you more detail than you're asking for, but I thought this would be a good opportunity for the court to come before this committee, talk to you a little bit about the year in review, what we've accomplished, what our challenges were. I will talk a little bit about the court organization. I also would like to talk about the impact of COVID on our activities, and then also give you some statistics about where we were back in 2019, where we are today, and then talk about our goals going forward. And also ending with a few budget ideas that I'd like to put in your heads. And this is the time when we start talking about those issues. But I assume I'll be back in front of you on that at a later date. So mission and responsibilities. Obviously, everyone here is aware of the court's mission. We are here to provide the best legal services to the defendants, to the public, to our citizens, make sure that everyone has equal justice under the law. The responsibilities of the court are obviously to support the judges and to properly administer the activities of the court. And that is everything from the day-to-day docket, in-court operations, management of finances, and everything in between. And if I'm going too fast at any point in time, just please raise your hand or jump in. Joanne's doing a great job.
So far, so good.
So far, so good. I told her I couldn't chew gum and walk at the same time. So what were our goals of 2021 and 2022? And I had the good fortune, thank you to the mayor and city council, of joining the court in September of 2021. And but was familiar with the court activities before that time because being in the legal department, the court operations did report directly to the legal department. So I was familiar with the status of the court activities. So our goals were really to reduce the backlog of cases, improve the communications with defendants, jurors, and our citizens, improve the court software and technology. I wanted to review the court's organization structure. And I also was hoping, and we were all hoping, we could take some steps to improve the staff workspaces. If we look at the year in review, I think it has been a good year. Thank you to the tremendous work of staff, judges, and the support of city council. We were able
Judge
to.
Adina, I just want to interrupt one thing.
Sure.
I think the public just needs to be aware, you were appointed in September of
21.
So it's been less than a year.
Correct.
I just think the public just needs to be aware. The things that you're about to go through in your year in review is you've not been there for a full year, and you're the only full-time judge at the court.
That's correct.
Right.
And I should have started out by, and we'll get to that in a second in the organizational structure, but I am the full-time administrative judge, but also sit on the bench several times a month. So we were able to convert to a new computer software system, which is CMS, it's called. It's a system that's being used by other municipal courts and state courts and county courts throughout the state. I will tell you that there have been some hiccups and bumps in integrating the software into our system. We had to transfer some old cases over to the new system, and how its reports are generated, how letters are generated to the defendants. Everything is new, frankly. And so the staff has been working hard to work through those bumps, and I think we'll get there. But again, we needed to make this change because the old system was outdated, would not be renewed. And so that was a major improvement and project for us this year, and we implemented at the end of February. We now our cases can be accessible through the Charleston County website. I went and checked today, and as of today, the information was not uploaded, but that was because we had some privacy concerns about some notes in our cases. And so that's going to be corrected, and that information should be available through the county website.
And let me interrupt you at this point, because those of us who are lawyers in practice regularly, we're familiar with both the federal system of online access to records, in the state had implemented a system, I guess it's about maybe 3-4 years in the making. And so Charleston County has what's called Court Plus as the access to public records. Are we hooked up to that Court Plus system, or is this a separate system on?
This is if you go online and you click on the public index, and there's a drop-down box, and you can link to summary courts, general sessions, common pleas. If you link to summary courts and you click on City of Charleston, although right now it says City of Magistrate, which is wrong, that's got to be corrected. But then if you link on that, it pulls up You can put in a case name, you can put in a defendant's name, you can put in a date range. And so we never had access to that system before. The public did not, but that was one of the benefits of the CMS system.
So is that on the clerk's website?
Yes,
Okay, that's the Julie Armstrong Clerk of Court
public
index.
index, correct.
And Susan, if I may, our system is not connected to Ms. Armstrong's Court Plus website. The access to this information would be through the court record search through sccourts.org.
Okay.
Thank you,
The
Jennifer.
State Court Administration's website.
Very good. Thank you.
Just run real quickly. We've updated the municipal court website so that there's more information there for people. We created a separate docket for our officers so they can link to the docket, and it's updated weekly so they will know when their next cases are going to be heard, which is something that the police department asked for and we were able to accommodate. We changed the time for when jurors could come to court. We had originally summoned them at 9 o'clock. They're now coming at 10 o'clock. And the point of that was we found that they were waiting an hour for the prosecutor and the defendants to basically get their act together. And it was causing some disgruntled jurors or potential jurors. So we moved the time back. And I think that has caused us to be more efficient as well as the jurors being more accommodating. We added, and this was actually before I started, Judge Maloney knows this, the police had asked for this. We've added some court time in the afternoon for police officers to write livability tickets. And so we have 3 times during the year, we have 3 p.m. court so that the officers who get off early in the morning can still write a ticket and show up in the afternoon. We made some sound improvements, technology improvements to one of the courtrooms. We promoted 2 of our staff members to senior management positions. We also initiated a rotation system for our bailiffs. We have 3 bailiffs, and we found that they were not all cross-trained. So now we're rotating them in and out of the courtrooms with both jury trials and bench trials so that they understand how the court works better. We hired a second part-time DUI public defender because, well, it's actually our first public defender for DUI exclusively, because we found that with the number of DUI cases that there was a need for that part-time public defender. And we finally installed new cubicles in the court. It was something that the court had been asking for a number of years. The court shut down for 1 week in this past June, and we repurposed the cubicles we had, and they're now at the Hope Center. So that ended up being a good thing for us. Challenges, COVID, I'll get into that in a little bit. COVID. I think that's probably all I want to say right there. Organizational chart, which is something that I know you all are interested in.
Can I interrupt you again, Judge?
Mm-hmm.
So with the COVID interruptions, for the public to know, the court was pretty much shut down. And then court was also held only remotely in certain circumstances. So when you mentioned COVID, it was a real issue of having the ability to have in-person or even remote court hearings. The other challenge, and you may be getting into this a little bit later, I don't want to jump the gun, but I know that it was also an issue with getting jurors to show up. Is that later on in your presentation or?
That is.
Okay, well, I'll wait till I hear from you then. Okay.
But there's a good ending to that story. So organization chart, obviously we have our judges over there on the right, Chief Judge Morrison, Judge Maloney, who handles livability and STR, Judge Byrd, who also handles homeless court, which he's going to speak about in a second, and Judge Ferguson, who handles the DUI court. The court director position is currently vacant, and we, as of July 1, will have a total of 3 other vacancies in court positions. I don't know if anybody has any questions at this point about that.
What is the staff size in the
full
court
staff,
administration's office?
full staff should be 22.
And then you said there's going to be, in addition to the court director, 2 more,
3.
3 more. And what level are those folks?
It's one senior docket clerk, and then one docket clerk, and then one person in the accounting tech position.
Okay.
We have advertised for the senior docket position and have a number of applications, so I anticipate we'll be filling that position soon. All right, types of court. I think just to remind everybody, we do have 7 different types of courts operating throughout the week and at different times during the month. I think you're all familiar with the criminal court, traffic, livability, STR, DUI. Homeless court, Judge Byrd is the one who helped put that court together. And it's a really interesting and unique court. And I thought it would be helpful if she could just speak to that court for a few minutes so you understand, get a better sense of what that court is about. Judge Byrd?
Thank you, Judge Herdina, and thank you, counsel, especially for allowing me to be present virtually, since I will be taking the bench at approximately 1:30 today. But we did want to update you all as to the current status of the homeless court. It was very successful and was a thriving program prior to the court closures caused by COVID. We had numerous successful participants who started the program with no permanent residence, no place to live to speak of, and at the time, no prospects of permanent housing or even job placement and a wage to make a living wage. At the end of the program, the goal is permanent housing. However, the support that we have from 180 Place in assisting us with this court program provides above and beyond housing. They help people obtain necessary job skills, get job interviews, help them with disability benefits, and any other facets of their needs that can help them put together a more successful lifestyle. So they not only finish this program with housing, but usually with a lot more resources than what they had when they came in. Unfortunately, the inability to hold court in person during the COVID closures really stifled a defendant's access to the homeless court program. We have found that program is most successful when it is done in person, when we can kind of have one-on-one routine contact with our participants, checking in with them. It helps them know that we're here, we're ready to help, and it also helps hold them accountable. And so at this time, we find ourselves with very few to no participants in the program. As of last month, May, we did have 2 participants successfully complete and graduate the homeless court program. And while we were very happy to have such a positive result, those were our last 2 participants in the program. And so at this point, we've all been making creative efforts to try to get the program back thriving again, and have come up with different steps we're taking to get information back out to the community and get the program to the point where it was pre-COVID, which was when members of our homeless community found themselves facing criminal charges in this court. Homeless court was so well known amongst the community, they would actually go to 180 Place on their own and request an application. They were coming to us. We were not having to refer them. And that's where we like to get back to. So what we're doing at this time is we're working very closely with Emily Beck, who's in the housing department as the community liaison and homelessness coordinator. She has gotten one of our friends at 180 Place involved with the homelessness advisory committee, and that has helped create relationships between our court and other departments within the city, especially our friends at the police department. We're also in contact with members of the police department to ways in which officers can help get information out to the homeless community, since they have that first line contact with the members of that community, making sure that they understand that homeless court is open and available and the ways in which to access it outside. We also have a tentative time scheduled for the representatives from 180 Place to come and speak to officers at maybe upcoming training or upcoming roll call. And we are also working with the city's Hope Center in order to hopefully have some of their service providers partner up with 180 Place so that we can expand the services that Homeless Court is able to offer through its program. Thank you, Judge Jardina.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions from any, I know Judge Bird has to go to 1:30, I think she said, court. So there or any members of the committee have a question for Judge Bird?
Good work. Keep it up. And thank you for working with Emily and our other new staff. We've reopened the Hope Center, as you know, and look to provide even more services there. So I think we have a real opportunity over the next 6 months to a year to really get back, as you say, to where it used to be. Thank you, Judge Bird.
Thank you, Mayor.
And I just want to add on to that, the idea of a homeless court was brought to our attention when I was on the Charleston County Bar Association Executive Committee. It was a new concept, quite frankly, several years ago to do this. And it was to really address what Judge Bird has mentioned. It's a unique situation, it's unique issues. I remember my early days as a public defender, as we would address homelessness, it was mainly a matter of people being arrested so they would have a warm place to stay on a cold night. It was an inhumane way of handling it, but they thought that was just the only alternative we had at the time, was to get people off the street for their own safety. And we've come a long way from that back in the 80s and 90s. And we're addressing this in a much more humane manner, I think. So thank you all for your work on that. It's very important. It's undersung, an issue that we're dealing with in our community, and it's very important that we have the professionals who understand homelessness and how to address it. So thank you all for doing that.
All right, I'll keep going unless there's any other questions. So real briefly, the court operates 5 days a week from 8:30 to 5. Court is held every day with the exception of Friday afternoons, which is the time that the staff then has an opportunity to finish their court work from the prior days. You're all welcome to come and visit anytime and watch the court in operation. I'm not going to really spend much time to talk about either bench trials or jury trials. We're going to get on to jury trials in a second in a little bit more detail. The next thing I wanted to talk about was COVID, and you asked a few questions about COVID and the impact of COVID on the court, and it really has been striking. So basically, in April of 2020, the South Carolina Supreme Court ordered that jury trials were to be suspended until further notice due to COVID, and that the bench trials were supposed to be held on a limited, if possible, remote basis and only in emergency circumstances. After that, in the summer of 2020, spring of 2020, Public Safety and City Council created and approved the DUI court. And Judge Ferguson was brought on board to try to cut back on the backlog and try to resolve some old cases that we had heard about in 2019. We had originally scheduled in the beginning of the year, the first DUI jury trials were supposed to be held in October of 2020, and that was postponed due to the Supreme Court order. In July of 2021, the Supreme Court allowed jury trials to resume, and we sent out summonses for 75 jurors and 8 appeared. So we could not conduct any jury trial that month. The second month, August of 2021, we upped the number of summonses sent out, and there were 150 jurors summoned and only 13 appeared. And the majority of the jurors who responded and asked to be excused during that time were either because they had COVID, a family member had COVID, or somehow they had a work-related issue that during COVID would not allow them to come in to the court. So in August, we kept trying. In August of 2021, 150 juror summons were sent out and 13 appeared, as I said. And so we had to cancel jury trials then. September of 2021, we upped the number of summonses going up to 200. And we got 19 jurors to appear, and with masks and with following safety protocols, the juror trials were beginning. We started our first jury trial in September of 2021. My last point is, I think we've returned to normalcy, or at least for right now. In May, 200 jurors were summoned and 52 appeared. In June, we've had 55 or 60 jurors respond. So we're back in good shape now, which is great.
And let's just expand this a little bit so the public understands. In municipal and magistrate level courts, we generally have 6 jurors and 1 or 2 alternates. I think Judge McFarland, that would be y'all's normal practice. Judge Morrison. So you have to have enough jurors available so that each the city and the defendant had enough for a strike, or if somebody had to be excused for a particular reason from one term to another. So you had to have a pool with a minimum number of 21.
21.
So you had to have at least 21 people show up in order to have a fair system of strikes. Yeah, exactly. So that was the strike for cause would also reduce that number down. So for the numbers that y'all are showing, you just can't have 8 jurors show up and you take those 8 and go, that's your jury. That's not fair to the defendant, not fair to the city as well as a prosecutor. So and courts cannot function unless jurors show up. And sometimes it takes the presence of a jury to help the case get moved along, because you've got a panel of folks there ready to hear a case. So the jury system is so important that we have our citizens being willing to appear on that date that they're summoned. When you send out these summons and you've had 200 and I think the number was 50 something showed up, are the summonses coming back as undelivered?
Some of them are coming back undelivered. Some are coming back, people just asking to be excused because of their age or different, circumstances.
So it's not if you got 200 summonses going out and only 50 appear, it's not as if 150 are just ignoring it.
No.
Okay, and that's of the 150 who don't show up, are all 150 of them asking to be excused or to be rescheduled to another term?
With some of them, the letters are undeliverable, and some they're just asking, to be excused because of age, and some, because of work circumstances, they'll ask, can they be rescheduled for another term?
So how many, if you can say that, what percentages are just someone just totally ignoring the summons?
Yep.
I'm sorry, about 15%?
A quarter, 1/4, 25%.
So is there any way that we need to be addressing that 25% who are just totally ignoring it and not responding?
Well, that's a good question. We've looked at trying to keep their name in the system and bring them back for another date. But as of right now, we haven't done anything about that. But certainly can look into it.
But I think that's something worthwhile looking into, because you've got to have that minimum number of people showing up, and people just not coming in and ignoring it. We can create problems down the line for us,
Right.
for the city in the future.
Right.
So I would just encourage you to look at, if you told me it was 5% or 10%, that's not that big of a deal, but you got up to a quarter of a jurors just totally being ignored. And you take that into account, the numbers who are undelivered plus the numbers that are asking to be excused for reasons. You don't want to get back into that situation when you can't hold court. So I'll just ask you to look and see what alternatives can be used to address
Sure.
the non-responsive 25% or so.
Okay, we can do that, definitely. And we'll try to get a better handle on that number too.
Okay.
So even in spite of all this, wanted to give you some information on what the court has been doing. And I asked staff to look at the period from May 31, 2021 to May 31, 2022, because I felt like in May of 2021, we again were starting to come out of COVID. We were having more bench trials and more cases were being moved. So during that 1 year period, we had 2,801 criminal offenses that were resolved. And that would have been either through a dismissal, it would have been through a plea, could have been through a trial, just any various mechanism that the court has available to it to resolve cases. And what's included there, just for information purposes, is what were the top 10 violations that were resolved in that 1 year period of time. And what I hope is when we come back next year, we'll have the same period of, we'll look at the same time period 1 year later and really do a good comparison of how the court is operating. But as you can see, at least as far as the criminal offenses go, the most cases disposed of were the possession of marijuana, followed by disorderly conduct. The traffic offenses, again, during this May 31, 2021 to May 31, 2022, 5,776 traffic offenses were resolved. The largest number being speeding, 10 miles or more over the speed limit. And the other one was for a DUI first offense. As far as livability goes, livability has been very active also in the last year. 899 livability offenses were resolved, 187 STR offenses. Probably not surprising to anyone, the largest number of cases that were resolved in livability court were the failure to wear a face mask. And Judge Maloney, I don't know if you want to comment on livability court at this point at all?
Well, yeah, I mean, that was a massive amount of effort by the city, the enforcement folks and livability and otherwise. It was frustrating for me as a judge because the fine was set by council right at $100. A large number of people did not post bond. And we have to try those cases, those mask cases. So it took a lot of resources, but fortunately, we're able to get through most of it without a lot of political discourse in the courtroom. I made sure that wasn't going to happen. And we're down. We finished, we got rid of them all. I mean, it was an aberration. It's something I've never seen before. And I don't think the city's ever gone through anything like that before. So it was a challenge, but we got it all done. We got it all done. But I would think that in having the discretion of a fine up to $100 or between 50 and $100, whatever, would have enabled me to address a large number of cases. There was a lot of frustration by citizens. Well, $100, that's a parking ticket or whatever. I mean, I've heard so many stories on all those cases, and but thankfully it's done. Thankfully it's done.
All right.
I want to make one quick comment too, Susan. I made a note. One of our bailiffs speaks Spanish, and I've noticed this. I also serve as a judge on another city here. I've seen a very large number of Hispanic-speaking defendants, especially in traffic court, and it's very helpful to have somebody right there. I can struggle to get through Spanish, but James Parler speaks Spanish, and he's a retired officer from California. It's good to have him on board. All right, I'm sorry, Susan. Go ahead.
Thank you, Judge Maloney. Mayor, any questions? Anybody on the committee? Thank you, Judge Maloney, for the hard work on the moving those mass cases and our livability issues. Very important aspect of what we do.
Yep.
In the city. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, then DUI court, just briefly touch upon it. We'll get some more statistics on this in a little bit later that are, I think, favorable. Basically, during this period of time, again, hands tied behind the back as a result of COVID restrictions, but during the 1 year period of May 31, 2021 to May 31, 2022, 309 DUI cases were resolved. So let's talk about our pending caseload. Right now, there are 857 criminal offenses pending, and that includes both livability and STR. There are 1,097 traffic offenses pending. In addition, there's 160 criminal traffic offenses on the jury trial docket, and there's 189 criminal traffic offenses on the pretrial docket. Livability, there are 73 pending offenses, 30 livability offenses on the jury trial docket. And Judge Maloney will tell you that that's not a good figure as of June, right, Judge?
That's right. That's right. No, you should also mention right now, I mean, Judge Ferguson does a very vigorous pre-trials of all of his cases, and I've just finished going through 44 jury trials. And if all holds true, at 8:30 on Tuesday morning, we'll put a significant number of cases on the record for guilty pleas. And we'll go from 44, hopefully down to as low as 10. Just resolving them through pre-trials, which I've been doing by Zoom, and I know Judge Ferguson does it the same way.
Very good.
And as far as DUI cases, again, there's currently 243 DUI offenses that are on either the pretrial or the trial docket. So one thing that came up at the last meeting was trying to compare what had happened back in 2019 to where we were 6 months ago. And I've done a rough comparison here. I shouldn't say rough. I think it's a good comparison, but we don't have apples to apples because in 19, we were working under a GEM system. Currently, we're now under a CMS software system, and the reporting is not identical. And so what staff had to do is do actually a lot of hand counting to show where we are now, just to make sure that we were not reporting anything differently or inaccurately. But let me first look at November of 2019. There were 450 pending jury trials at that time, excluding DUIs. It's not on the chart, but I went back and looked, and at that point in time, there was one case from 2016, 8 cases from 2017. There were 44 cases from 2018 and 214 cases from 2019. And I can give you those figures a little later. Right now, if we look at the situation, and this is again, just criminal jury trial or pretrial pending cases, we only have 3 for 2017, and before in 2019, we had 8. And I asked the staff to pull those 3 cases because I was curious why we still had 3 cases. And it turns out that all 3 of them involved defendants who were either put in a pretrial intervention program or had a conditional discharge, perhaps did not comply with the pretrial intervention program initially, were put back into the program. And so it really is an effort by the court to try to work with those defendants to make sure that they don't have a shoplifting charge or an assault charge on their record. And so sometimes these numbers can be misleading because there is a lot of work going on behind a case to try to get a defendant in the best position possible, but at the same time, protect the citizens through the prosecutor. So, but going on, continuing in 2018, there were 44 cases on the criminal jury trial docket. We now have 10. In 2019, there were 214, and right now we have 21. So there's been a good effort to get those aging cases taken care of. However, you can see, and this is sort of the COVID bubble hitting right now, for 2024, there's 94 jury trial or pretrial cases. From 2021, there's 175. And so for the first part of 2022, there's 46. So those are the cases that we really need to be focusing on going forward. Livability, Judge Maloney just said that the figures here, there's 41 pending livability and STR jury trial cases, but he's cleaning that up so that this number is not accurate as of a week or two from now in the future. I want to talk about DUI cases, which is the next slide. One of the main impetus for setting up the DUI court was the number of ancient cases that were going on in the court for DUI offenses. And the court was created, and Judge Ferguson was retained to handle those cases. And the judge, I think, has done a remarkable job in focusing on the older cases and moving those along quickly in spite of the challenges that he's had with COVID. And frankly, in spite of challenges that you just have with DUI cases that are much more involved, frankly, from an evidence standpoint than some of our other cases. But as you can see, in 2019, there were four cases that were dating back to 2017. Those have been cleared out. There were 2018 cases. Those have been cleared out. There were 151 cases in 2019, and our records now show there are 3. So he has organized his docket in a way that puts the older cases first and basically pushes those cases forward. Again, you can see the COVID bubble here hitting 158 cases from 2021. And so far this year, we've got 55 DUI cases. This information is going to tie in a minute to what I'm going to ask as far as the court's requests on budgets. But before I go further, I often get a question from counsel and from people about fines and why can we not keep more of the fines that the defendants are being charged. And I just wanted to show you a breakdown. And this is a DUI example. So the numbers are not correct across the board because every offense changes as far as what is the fine amount. But this is standard in the sense of the city keeps roughly 47% of the fine. And that is by court administration, state law, other sources. And so while we do collect, in this case, $992 from the defendant, we only keep 47% of that. And again, this is just an example of one fine, but each fine carries with it some state assessment, some particular, victim service fee, whatever. So I know my time is probably up.
It is. I was going to ask you to speed up. Go to the goals and because I want to come back to the administrative part of this.
Sure. Real quickly. So obviously our goals are to continue resolving the old cases. And how long should it take us to resolve a case? Or in other words, how long should a case be pending? And I think that's, it's a good question. I'd love to hear from the other judges what their answer would be. I think it would be ideal if cases would be pending for no more than a year on our docket, the jury trial cases, even a shorter period of time. But that will require, I believe, a commitment of more resources. Also, in addition to having more resources, there are just challenges that are intertwined with the cases in our court, okay? There's difficulty locating homeless and other defendants. So cases, on the docket for a while we are trying to locate the defendant. We also have difficulty on cases locating victims, and they have victims' rights, very serious victims' rights in South Carolina that we need to make sure are being protected and enforced. Of course, we have conflicts with other courts, General Sessions Court, Court of Appeals, other places. So, we don't always get lawyers to show up on their court dates because they have conflicts with other jurisdictions who have more seniority than we do. But nonetheless, this is a goal. We need to keep working on this. We need to keep our eye focused on it. So I think what we'd like to do, and this was actually an idea of Judge Ferguson's that he would like to try out, which is right now in DUI court, we have 1 month pretrial, the next month jury trial, the next month's pretrial. And what he's finding is the lawyers understandably respond more to being called up for a jury trial than a pretrial. And so we are talking about eliminating a certain number of pretrials and substituting jury trials for that. So in a month, 3 months, you would have pretrial, jury trial, jury trial. And then you'd go pretrial, jury trial, jury trial, because it's the jury trial with the jurors coming in that is what forces the parties to look seriously at a case and try it or resolve it if at all possible. So that's one thing. We also have a 5th month, 3 times a year, which right now where the court isn't being totally utilized. And so we think that there's some time there that we could possibly schedule what's called TIAs, trying your absence cases, jury cases where a defendant has asked for a jury trial and has disappeared, but you still need to try that case. And so therefore, we're looking at that. Real quickly, our goals, that's up there. We are looking at some new financial recovery efforts. We'd like to improve the staff workspace. And finally, this is something that I had talked to the mayor about, and he had mentioned to me a while back, is whether we could be thinking about a youth education court. We met with students this past spring from Philip Simmons High School, and they were fascinated in the court process to understand how the system worked, but they also were very interested in the jobs that a court offers. And so we would like to think about creating some sort of a program with the local high schools, perhaps once a month to have schools come in. We could talk to them about the court and opportunities. And I think, Mayor, that was your idea from a while back, and we've hopefully we'll look at it and come back with some suggestions soon.
I was very exhausted. That review and thorough, but we need to have this review because our backlog was so dismal, particularly while we hired a DUI judge and prosecutor and public defender, because the number of pending cases were just getting out of control. And I know COVID was a big part of all that, but we appreciate the upgrade on that. I would just want to go back very quickly to the organizational chart. Because my conversations with Judge McFarland and Mr. Harris had dealt with the issues dealing with that. I know we've been without a director for some time, and Judge Ordina, having you present has made a huge difference with that and filling that gap. Where do we go from here from the organizational standpoint? And then I want to ask either Judge McFarland or Mr. Harris to comment about that. Where do we stand with the organization? Are we moving in the right direction? Are we taking care of our defendants' rights? And as we're going through this, because while we're being speedy and expedient, we do have a major concern in making sure that our citizens who are being charged with a crime, no matter if it's a traffic violation or livability issue, whatever level of offense, that we are addressing those fairly and accurately as well. So organizationally, you sound like y'all are doing a great job. I mean, it's just with these numbers that you've given us and the staff, y'all have done yeoman's work, and y'all should be applauded for that and recognized for being efficient and organized and getting the job done. And I really do appreciate that. But where do we go from here organizationally in y'all's view?
Well, I did talk to Joanne and James earlier about the question and wanted to get their input, and I had an opportunity to now observe the court for 9 months or whatever. My opinion is right now, I think things are working well. I think there's areas that we can focus on that we haven't had time to do yet. And we probably could use someone to assist with court special projects. And again, we need to see our main needs are in the staff in the courtroom. That's where we really need help. And particularly if we're going to be expanding a little bit and using the 5th week of the month 3 times a year. We really, that is the place where right now I see we have the staffing needs.
Okay, very good. Mayor, before I turn it over, I did ask Judge McFarland to come and Mr. Harris to come because they did want to make a comment about their insight on the administrative side of this. But any other comments first from you or any council member?
I'm just thankful to Judge Hardina and all the judges and staff. It seemed to me since the last full report we've had that a lot of progress has been made. New software system. I hope that helped with the efficiency, even new cubicles. I know it's a journey and not a destination, but good work, everyone. Keep it up. Thank you.
So you can direct it towards me, and then we'll figure it out how you want to direct this. But Arthur, you've been a municipal judge for more years than you want to say, but
That's right.
so you have different insight on this, and I know that y'all have been very much involved and concerned about the workings of the court staff. So
Yeah, and so that the committee would know how Jerry Harris and I got involved. We were part of the Commission on Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. And so there was a criminal justice reform subcommittee as a part of the commission, and I served on the subcommittee for criminal justice and the courts. And so one of the things that came out of, along with Attorney Condon, and two other people whose names escape me right now. There were 4 of us on this particular subcommittee dealing with the criminal justice aspect of the city and the courts. And one of the issues that came up primarily was, looking at the court from a constitutional standpoint. That is that there are 3 branches of government: executive branch, legislative branch, and of course, the judicial branch. And whether the city of Charleston at the time had a truly independent judicial system in through its municipal court. And of course, the organization at that time, I believe, was the fact that the administration of the court was really under the executive branch and through corporation counsel. So one of the recommendations that we had, and what we've been discussing with Councilman Shahid, is the fact that there needed to be some independence of the court. And looking at the organizational chart as it stands today, it appears that there has been a return to that, because during the time that I served on the court was basically a department. And so it was independent of the executive. And of course, the city council sets budgets and it sets the rules and the terms for the judges and that sort of thing. I'll just make one comment about the numbers. In 1982, I don't know why this sticks with me, but we had a total of 54,000 traffic cases and 10,000 criminal cases that were handled in a single courtroom over a year's time. And so I'm pleased to see that those numbers certainly are much more manageable now, but what I see in terms of the organization really is an expansion of the role of the court. And I think that is the important thing here, because in addition to the staffing and the judges, you also have what had been implemented as the public defender system. So while there are private attorneys who represent folk, but there's also the important role of the public defender, because we have so many people who are indigent defendants whose rights are protected through the court. So the court offers the public defender services, and on the other side, which was also important as part of the organizational charge, is a prosecutor, because victims as well as police officers needed legal representation. So that's a major part of how you keep an independent judiciary, because the judge doesn't have to decide whether I'm favoring the police officer or favoring a defendant, but being that neutral party. So as far as I'm concerned, what I've heard here today especially with the expansion to the homeless court. And that's just so that, as far as I'm concerned, Charleston has always been a leader in the operation of the municipal court. It has set the standard and continues, from what I see here today, to set that standard. And so that as from an organizational standpoint, from an independent judiciary standpoint, and Judge Morrison was there when certainly he survived longer than I did, but you know, the importance of judges being able to come, have cases prepared, you know, staff is there, and of course the operation. So you've got the setup in terms of the administrative judge. So you've got a judge who's responsible for the court, the director who basically kind of takes care of day-to-day management of staffing, because you've got a judge who's also administrative judge but sits on the bench. So somebody's got to mind the store while, you know, the judge is judging. And so to have a full-time judge is really, I think, a tremendous move, and one that had been advocated for some time. So city certainly is to be congratulated there. And so I see where we've gone and where you've gone in terms of the operations and the fine tuning that will continue to take place over time. So we met and our committee on the commission met in early 21. So you're talking about a little over a year's time that, you know, certainly what we've talked to Councilman Shahid about is, you know, being implemented. So from my standpoint, as a former member of this team, certainly I think we have made significant progress in making sure that the city has a municipal court that's truly operating as a municipal court.
And one additional comment, one of the recommendations during the deliberations of the 90, 120-day deliberations of our committees had to do with the data collection system. And it's very good to see that that's being addressed. One of the concerns associated with that system is the data collection was the ability to see whether or not there were disparities that occurred as a result of who was moving through the system, timing and the like. So as you begin to think about the backlogs and things to be addressed and how you're making adjustments to the system, whether or not the changes that are being made are in fact making the system more just, that people are getting procedural justice. People might have now, under the prior data system, there wasn't a real situation. People having anecdotal comments, right? But you now may be in a situation that you can actually report back to the Public Safety Committee to get a sense of where we are in terms of racial disparities or other disparities in that regard in terms of system. Since the justice system is not only the police, all right, it is the courts as well.
And just if I can, just 10 seconds, with respect to the Public Safety Committee, it is so important that there is the ability of the court staffing to have the relationship, at least a funneling of information and requests through a committee of council. And also for council really to know what is going on, because it is citizens who complain to council members when something isn't going right. And I think the Public Safety Committee has that function that allows them to certainly have a relationship with the court and the court with them. So I applaud you for having.
Thank you all for your interest in this. And let me just make a quick comment, because I think what happens that we lose sight of the importance of maybe municipal and magistrate level court. And Judge Dina said, you know, we're the lowest level of the court system. And then when there are conflicts, other lawyers get their cases continued because it may be in circuit court or federal court or whatever. But the importance of, and this is what's lost on the public a good bit of time. If we don't have these safeguards that you have just mentioned about the public defender being engaged in this, because some of these lower level crimes like a DUI or a driving under suspension or a drug offense, if they're convicted, if a person's convicted, those lead to what can be enhanced sentencing further along down the road. For instance, if a person's convicted of a drug offense and then subsequently they're arrested again for a general sessions or a federal offense, that conviction serves as a predicate offense that could elevate that person's sentence to a minimum term of imprisonment, even if it's a simple possession of marijuana charge. Likewise, if a person's arrested for a DUS, a second or third time, it goes into general sessions court, and you start accumulating minimum fines or minimum suspensions or minimum jail time for DUIs or DUS. So we can't under minimize the importance of a municipal court, because it's so important, particularly to folks who don't have the resources to maybe fairly and adequately address those offenses, which if they were addressed properly in the first time, they may not be elevated to a subsequent offense. So we've got to be cognizant of the responsibility that the whole court family staff, from every aspect of this, from the victim's aspect to the defendant's aspect to the court staff aspect, the judges, the prosecutors, the witnesses, et cetera, that we run a system that is not only efficient, but it's fair. And I think we've been doing that. I think we've been very cognizant of it. But the questions that y'all have raised and the concerns, the only way to do that is to maintain a level of independence with this, so that the folks who we charge to do this can do their job without interference. And we are with, like you mentioned earlier, the Public Safety Committee, to sort of take a step back every now and then to make sure that's what's taking place. That's our role in all of this. So we've got more work to do. Y'all have been talking to me about it. I don't want to say how many, but I appreciate the conversations that we've had. But we got to continue the conversation, and we got to continue the dialogue and making sure that we're implementing these things. So, Judge Adina, thank you, Judge Morrison, thank you for being here. And anything that we can do to help, we'll take into consideration in the budget process some of these concerns that y'all have. I think they're very valid, and we need to move on with that.
Thank you very much.
I'm getting text from our clerk saying I need to move on a little bit faster. So thank y'all all for being here, and thank y'all for the comments on that. I did want to get an update on our emergency management. I know that Shannon had just retired, not necessarily on a timely basis. Hurricane season just began. So I just wanted, if somebody could comment about where we are with our emergency management, what is going on with that. I didn't know if anybody was available to talk about that.
We're still in business.
We're still in business.
One person, Rick and the chief will both comment on that.
We can tag team it. Do you want to start? The the emergency management office has been in a variety of different places. It was in resilience at one time. Then it went to the fire department. And I think then there was some concern on Shannon's part whether we wanted to stay in the fire department. So I think in the interim, what we're doing, we've posted the position. The day-to-day operation will be managed by Dale Morris as our chief resilience officer. And in emergencies, the fire department is going to take control of the emergency situation.
Under normal operation, when we do get an emergency management director in, of course, the fire department has pledged to prop up the emergency management function, make sure we don't fail. But like Rick said, in the interim, until the director is here, we'll just step in if there's something that requires the MEOC to activate.
So with him, I know that I met with him. Shannon told me he met with the mayor and he met with me. He wanted to sort of give me an exit update. He did have specific recommendations, I think. I'm sure he's talked to the mayor about that, and hopefully you guys. One of the things that he mentioned to me was sort of where this all fits organizationally with the city. And this may be an opportunity to look at those suggestions and see how to implement them. Just like we're doing with the municipal court, become more efficient. If everybody understands their roles and responsibilities and how it interplays with the fire department and the police department and other agencies. So I just wanted to make sure we're on top of that. We're looking at it and reassure the city at the same time that while we're just beginning hurricane season, that we got somebody at the helm And it's,
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
On a day-to-day basis, Dale Morris will be overseeing that division, that office. The two remaining staff people, Shannon Whitehead and Daniel Flassis, are there, meeting with Dale on a, if not a daily basis, on a weekly basis. And then the fire department is ready to fill in if we truly have an emergency, to provide that kind of leadership. And we are looking at all of the recommendations that Shannon has made.
okay. And I know one of those is increasing his budget.
Exactly. And that was one of his concerns,
Yeah.
I think, to be frank, with being in the fire department, is the competing budgetary needs and demands, and that often he did not feel that maybe his demand rose to the top with all the other demands the chief is facing. So we're looking at that pretty carefully.
Okay. All right. Thanks for the update, and we'll probably bug you a little bit more as the months go by to see where we are with the hiring that new director. Thank y'all for doing that. Mayor, if you don't mind, I know we want to get to the update on the registry, but I just want to make sure we get this one thing taken care of with this ordinance being passed. And Julia, if you don't mind, just sort of give us a quick update and what you're looking for. It's just a matter of updating a compliance matter, I believe. Is that correct? On item number 6.
Yes, sir. This will be the quickest update today. So this amendment will simply bring our fire code reference to the International Fire Code up to state requirements.
So this is a request for an ordinance to amend Chapter 13 of the Fire Prevention and Protection. And all we're doing is just making sure we're in compliance with the current
Correct.
code.
It keeps the ordinance in compliance with the latest edition of the International Fire Code.
I move for approval.
Second. All right, all those, any discussion on item number 6? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. And probably one of the things that we had to get done today, and I didn't mean
Right.
to
No problem.
vote you, Mayor, but I just want to make sure before we ran out of time that we got that squared away. Thank you, Julia, and Chief Courier for working on that, making sure we were in compliance. I don't think we have the planning director available for public safety committee meeting, so thank you for jumping in.
No
And being
problem.
patient and hanging around for the last item. So we're on item number 5, actually, I guess.
Yes, sir. So good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the Public Safety Committee. So I'm going to be very, very brief and just give a quick overview of the status of the rental registry program. We will have a much more in-depth, detailed presentation at the July CD committee when we actually have more details about the program ironed out across the groups. I would just start out by reminding everybody that rental registries have been around for quite a while. They're actually pretty prevalent here in South Carolina. A number of other cities in the state have rental registry programs, including Florence, Rock Hill, Columbia, Clemson, Woodruff, and Spartanburg. These programs are generally about getting contact information at their base level from property owners, particularly in communities that have high rates of rental housing. Oftentimes you'll see these in college towns, but you do see them also in a lot of places with a lot of hospitality and tourist energy as well. And they can run the gambit. So again, at their base, they're usually about providing up-to-date, relevant contact information for the property so that in case there is any situation that may occur, it allows for our livability folks, our public safety folks to be able to contact a responsible party and try to quickly address a situation that may be happening at the property. At its farthest end, they can include safety inspections, usually they're annual or every couple year safety inspections that can occur, and other services that may go along with the registry program. For the city of Charleston, we've been actually looking at the concept of a registry program since 2013. In fact, they did some early work in 2013 on creating a rental registry program. That did not end up going anywhere. However, as a part of the city plan work, in addition to other conversations that were just generally happening in the community, particularly here in the downtown area, we did hear during those outreach sessions and data gathering sessions a concern for absentee landlords and tenant accountability as one of our quality of life issues. Again, particularly in downtown, but not exclusively to downtown. We did hear about it in other areas of the community as well. At that time, our Business and Neighborhood Services Division within planning was asked to do some research on what other communities, particularly college towns, because again, we do see these more often in college towns. What do they do to manage livability issues when you have a high rental occupancy area? And then also in 2020, staff began some just early drafting of some ordinance language. In 2021 and into this year, the team has taken that draft language and has been working to refine that in an internal working group. That's included folks from planning department, specifically Becca Hobson and the team in Business and Neighborhood Services in the Neighborhoods group. It's also involved Dan Riccio and the livability team, as well as folks in livability, most recently Magali from Julia's team. We've been working on how would the workflow for the permitting system work? What would the application look like? What kind of information do we want to capture on that application, as well as what would be the budgetary impacts of creating and implementing a registry program? And then further, we've done some, particularly in the last little while, we've done some community and neighborhood outreach specifically around conversations around a rental registry program. Becca has had conversations with neighborhood presidents and neighborhood leaders about that concept and how we might deploy it in the city. So as of right now, the pilot is looking to start with just one neighborhood. We need to really get the kinks out of whatever process we move forward with. We had two candidates, the east side and the west side. They're the two smallest of the neighborhoods that we've been able to identify what the rental unit impact is on those. And so we had both those neighborhoods as candidates. When we look at calls for service, we did see that the east side did have a slightly higher calls for service than the west side. So when we identified a pilot neighborhood where we think we can do a manageable number of units to start off with, but yet also have a high impact on being able to follow up on concerns or issues with this program, we selected the east side. We do look at this as a phased implementation. We would start phase one as the pilot with the east side. In phase two, we would look to add some of these city center neighborhoods, the additional ones, again, generally in the area here of the peninsula downtown and around the university. And then in future phases, phase 3+, we would look to incorporate additional areas of the city. We do want to just make sure that we're all aware. Right now, our analysis shows we have an estimated 41,000 rental units in the city of Charleston. And so this, at the end of the day, this registry could be a relatively big deal in terms of getting that information and keeping it constantly updated.
Let me interrupt you about that number real quick. So when you talk about 41,000 rental units citywide, that would include apartment complexes.
That would include apartment complexes, yes.
My district, the Palms apartment, would be part of that. So people have an idea what we're talking about. We're not talking about 41 duplexes or single family residences. We're talking about apartments that have 100 units to 200 units to whatever number we're talking about as well.
I'm going to look to Becca. I believe it's the property, not necessarily the individual units. This is properties, right? So we're talking 41,000 properties that are rental properties. So in the instance of an apartment building, it's that apartment complex that's included here, not necessarily the 100 units within that apartment complex.
So to make sure we're clear on this, then the Palms apartment in my district would be counted as one unit.
One property for purposes of this, and then as a part of the registry program, they'd need to update us on contact information for all of those units.
So the number of rental units, that may be sort of a misleading definition. It should be 41,000 rental properties, I guess. And
yes. And we're making a note. We'll make sure
Yeah.
that's updated for
I
future.
thought that number sounded a little low. That's why I wanted to make sure that we were.
Understood. Yeah, I apologize. That's rental properties
Rental
citywide.
properties.
And Mr. Chairman, if I may add, I believe our focus is not on the large apartment complexes because they normally post who their management company is, and we normally have a contact. What we're really seeking is those properties might be a one-off, two-off property owner, an LLC. Everybody puts their property in an LLC. You're having trouble with tenants at the property, and there's a LLC in Michigan. You don't know who to call for responsibility. Those are the kinds of cases that we're really trying to focus on.
And I think to
Absolutely.
that point, Mayor, that also reflects, I know that one of the earliest issues that we had dealing with short-term rentals were that they were folks who were absentee short-term rental owners as well. So that, I don't know how that plays into your statistics, but that was one of the early problems we had back several years ago with people who were using the short-term rentals as a party venue location, particularly downtown. So
Mr.
I
Chair,
just want to make sure we were clear on the numbers and we're dealing with
Understood.
apples
Yeah,
and apples.
we'll clean up that language there.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, Councilmember Seekings has his hand up.
Okay. We can't see you from this far away, Councilmember Seekings. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll unmute my video for a sec. I'm driving, so I just didn't think it's kind of distracting. Anyway, thank you for these efforts. I would just like to say this. We have been trying in earnest to get something that looks like this in place for over a decade, as Mr. Summerfield noted. I think if you talk to Dan Riccio, that the efforts we've had have been met with some resistance on a number of different fronts. And it's sort of a shame that it took some extreme events to get this back on the docket. But I will just say this, in order to identify who needs to be on any registry that we do, it's going to be a task in and of itself, because if you're a small renter of properties, meaning you don't have a large number of properties, we don't require you, among other things, to get a business license. And today, as opposed to 10 years ago when we first doing this, renting properties is big business. I mean, if you have one or two properties, you're not out there with a business license, but you are generating a huge amount of revenues. And so as we go through this process, I think we need to really think about what we're really trying to do here. One is, I get it. We're trying to identify people who own it so we can have some accountability. But what does that accountability look like day in and day out? I think one of the things is sharing fairly, like everybody else who's in business here, with having to have a business license. I mean, people are renting out houses for $4,000, $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 a month and required to have no business license at all. That's the equivalent of a lot of small businesses in many parts of the city. So I applaud this. I'm also not sure why, Mr. Mayor, we need to do this as a pilot program. I mean, we've been looking at this for a long time. I think we should put this in place and institute it. And if we have to phase it in because we have staffing issues, that's fine. But I think once you put it in place in one part of the city, I know in particular, some of the areas that I represent, they're going to want it almost immediately, if not immediately, because of the long-term, over decade efforts to have something like this in place. So I applaud it. I would love to see us put some resource towards it if we can, and give it some teeth, and not call it a pilot, so we can get it in place across the city.
Good points, Councilmember. Thank you for, and any other committee members who I cannot see, just make sure that we recognize you. Chime in, let the clerk know that, because we can't see from where we're sitting right now.
I think Councilmember Shealy may want to speak.
Councilmember Shealy.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I'm in favor of this. I'm in favor of what Councilman Seeking said. I think it's something we need. So thank you.
Thank you, sir.
So thank you, Mr. Chairman, and just pick up on a couple of those points. We do plan for the registration to be required, even if you own one unit. We're looking to slightly decrease the number of units that would require you to also have a business license. So maybe someone with a duplex, one duplex would not have to have a business license, but he would still have to register with us so we can add some accountability. And when we bring forward the details within the next month, you'll see that there's actually an accountability system of kind of a point system like you have on your driver's license. And you get so many points for offenses by your tenants. And after a certain number of points accrue, that it would almost be a situation where we would ask for the eviction of the tenants from the property. So it adds some real accountability to the behavior of tenants, and also brings the landlord into being subject to some fines and accountability in the event that he basically ignores a situation where his tenants are out of control.
So just next steps, we are working right now very diligently to finalize what that proposed ordinance would look like, and then the workflow that would come out of that ordinance from the internal city process. We will expect at the July CD committee to present the pilot details, or maybe it's not a pilot. Based on the comments that we heard here, maybe we look to just implement phase 1 period. Excuse me, and present that draft ordinance again at CD committee in July. And then based on what we hear from that, we would anticipate that in August, we would begin to develop and roll out the website and other material that we expect needs to be out there. So community members have a lot of information and education about what the program is, how to be compliant with the program, and what properties are in that phase 1. This fall, we expect to work with between planning and livability on budget requests for supporting the pilot phase, or again, just start the rollout of the registry program. Additionally, we would expect council with the support that the Public Safety Committee has stated today, we would expect that City Council in the fall would adopt an ordinance to establish the registry, and then we continue to do ongoing community outreach, continuing to gather data, information, and then work on that compliance piece for getting those property owners registered, the proper information submitted, and do the follow-up. And with that, we can take a couple quick questions if you'd like. Otherwise, we plan to be at CD committee next month with the full package.
Well, just to echo what Councilman Seeking said, I know this has been something the city's been working on for quite some time. And it may be a distinction. Mayor made a comment about how many units, but there's a difference between a property owner who has a residential unit that they rent out. That they may have owned the house and decided the house got too small for them, or they've been transferred for a short period of time and they want to rent the house out and make sure it's being taken care of. That's a different scenario than the scenario dealing with folks who create a legal entity like an LLC, and they're renting the house out for a for-profit measure. It's a business to them. And regardless of how many units they may have or how many units that property may have, there is a huge difference in that. I certainly had a townhouse that I lived in. We outgrew it and we rented it out. It was a year to year type thing with college students. But looking back on that, when I do rent out property as an LLC, I put myself into a different category. I'm turning myself into a business, as opposed to I'm just trying to hold on to a piece of property that I had. It used to be my home. So there's a distinction with that. So some of the things I think we need to take in consideration is that when you look at how the lease is structured, maybe one of the things that we take in consideration. Short-term rentals is certainly a different category. A 6-month rental is another category, and a building that's just purchased for the sake of raising money would fit into another category as well. Then the other things, I know we've got landlord-tenant issue rights that are done by statute. And I know we've got code issues as well, that certain buildings have got to reach a code. But maybe this is an opportunity to sort of wrap all that into this ordinance, to making sure that the residents is meeting the minimum requirements of the landlord tenant act. And maybe the fire marshal has already got that under review and under consideration. But this is an opportunity to make sure that basic things are taken care of. There are a fire escape for that property, that they've got a minimal amount of fire repressants in that building as well. So it may transcend beyond just a nuisance and a problem when someone's misbehaving in that unit to a safety issue overall. Those are just some thoughts I'm having listening to this discussion that maybe we ought to look at as to how we regulate this. I know what the problems are with it, and the absentee landlord, when you can't find them, you can't run them down, creates a huge problem for enforcement of our livability codes and our criminal codes for that matter as well. But I would just ask you to sort of look at this one, even a little bit, expanding it out a little bit broader to just beyond making sure we got somebody registered, making sure that if there is truly a business, that they're held accountable from a top to bottom business level to just, we know who they are and where to locate them if a problem pops up.
And Mr. Chairman, Councilmember Seekings has his hand up.
We'll let him talk twice, I guess, Madam Clerk. Go ahead.
Well, I'm not going to ask for equal time, Mr. Chairman. Okay.
Go right ahead.
So I just a quick comment back after the mayor's comments. Having a registry is really good, and it's going to be great to be able to identify people. But the question is, what's the next step? I don't think it standing alone is going to do what we would like it to do. And just hearing sort of the description of being able to identify and then building up a point system and then asking for eviction, I think we're going to have some real legal problems with forced evictions. Where we have our hooks, as you know, is through zoning and through our business licensing. And so I really think we're going to at some point have to think about tying this into business licensing. So if we have a continuing problem, we've got a real way to attack that problem, and not by bringing an action that may or may not be constitutionally infirm to have forced evictions. We can do it through the business licensing process. And look, today's day and age in Charleston, it's not 10 years ago. Single properties are running out for huge amounts of money. I mean, the house across the street from me is one single family house with 3 units in it. And I can assure you, they are doing business over there. I mean, they're doing more business than some retailers are doing in West Ashley, and they're paying exactly $0.00 in business license fees. It's also a way for us to identify 4 versus 6% properties that should be on the tax roll. So I think it's a really worthy effort. I just think that we have to really think about in the end, in terms of the goal that we have in mind, which is being able to identify people who are owning property so we can have a conversation with them if the need arises, but also what hooks we'll have when we can identify a problem. And I just think a simple registry is not going to give us the hook that we need. So look forward to seeing what this ordinance looks like, and certainly support the effort, but I think we need to really think it through to the end and what the end game is going to be. So thank you.
Before I recognize you, I just want to comment. You look like a movie star with those sunglasses on.
Very cool.
Very cool.
Very cool. So,
Yes, sir,
Mr.
Mr.
Chairman and Councilmember Seekings, that is exactly what staff is trying to do, be very thoughtful about this. And to be honest with you, the permit, there would actually be a permit issued to rent the one house. And so it acts almost like a business license. And if you have a certain level of violation, then the permit could be revoked, which would disallow you from even renting the one house. So when we get the full ordinance before you, hopefully shortly, I'd like to in advance of the next July meeting, so y'all can have a chance to look at it in more detail and make any comments or suggestions that you like. But it is moving along in exactly the direction that you're proposing. And they have been pretty thoughtful about that. There are some considerations about bringing the business license all the way down to 1. And there's some benefits to doing this permit system with the point system that I mentioned that you don't get with the business license. So anyway, we they've been very thoughtful about it. When y'all see the details, I'm sure there'll be more good recommendations, but we are trying to have that net result that you described. And by the way, on the rollout, I certainly hope we can do the pilot this year, this fall, as Mr. Summerfield mentioned, the capacity that we have to take on 41,000 potential registrations from scratch is large, is voluminous. So we really believe if we can do it, just get it going through the end of the year and then put the budget in request, because it will take a little staff to do this. Of course, the permit fee will help pay for that staff. So I hope it'll be revenue neutral, really, but it takes a little organization, and we'd like to get our legs underneath us trying a test area first.
Well, we'll look forward to the July meeting to see where we are with a proposed. Hopefully you get a draft by then. You got some good feedback and comments. I hope to give you some more other direction on
Absolutely.
where this leads to. Before we adjourn, we are trying to set a date for the dedication of the Richard Fields courtroom. We've got the plaque up. I've heard back from the Charleston County Bar Association. They'll help sponsor a reception following. So we'll just have to coordinate a date with your office, Mayor, with the court staff, and of course our honoree, Judge Fields. But hopefully we can do that in sometime in the month of July. We can do that. There be no further business. This very short and concise meeting of the Public Safety Committee is hereby adjourned.